you'll come down to the very bottom level, and there's these 64 elements that I showed you, 64 elements in the bottom level. If you can't see them on the webcast, don't worry. On the CD-ROM, they come out a lot more clear. Those 64 elements, they're divided into groups of 4 called quads. And in the quad that contains the problem element, there are 3 other elements as well. Opposite the problem will be the solution. Now, don't get the idea that just because I put problem here, it has to be there. Problem could be any one of the 4 elements in a quad. It doesn't have to be the upper left-hand corner one. But wherever you put the problem, opposite it is the solution. And if you were to choose the solution first, opposite would be the problem. So you also have a solution in every single through line. And in addition to the problem and solution, the other 2 are focus and direction. Now again, focus does not have to be next to, horizontally, the problem. I could have put direction up here, for example, and focus down here. But wherever focus is, direction will be opposite it. What these really mean is problem and solution are like a disease and a cure. Focus and direction are like a symptom and a treatment. In some stories, if you have the symptom and you treat it long enough, then the body can recover by itself and you never have to find a solution for the problem. In fact, there may be no solution. Like there may be a disease that has no cure, but if you can keep the patient alive by giving them fluids long enough, they'll survive and cure themselves. Something like Ebola, for example, there is a survival rate. There's no treatment, but if you just, particularly no cure for it, but there is a treatment, which is to give them plenty of fluids and keep them from overheating and so on. So you treat them long enough, they might survive. In other stories, no matter how much you try and treat something, it's not going to survive unless you find the cure. It'll just weaken and get worse and worse until it dies. Well, that's the difference between a changed character and a steadfast character. A steadfast character is focusing on the focus and the direction. Here's the symptom, let's keep applying the direction. And they never change to try and find the solution to the problem. A changed character goes from problem and eventually adopts solution, abandoning the treatment, because you can't do both at the same time. So every story then has 4 through lines, and each through line not only goes from top to bottom of the chart to have a domain, and within that a particular concern, and within that concern an issue, and within that issue a particular problem, but horizontally the problem is now looking at those elements and saying there's a problem, a solution, a focus, and a direction at the very lowest level of each of the 4 through lines, each of the 4 domains. Now, there are other story points as well in each one of the 4 through lines. But these story points don't, even though they occur the same way and have the same relationship, because they are occurring in a different point of view, they start to take on different characteristics, different flavors. These other ones, there are 3 of them that we're going to look at. The direction, I'm sorry, 2 of them we're going to look at, the catalyst and the inhibitor. The catalyst and the inhibitor. Catalyst, A-list, okay, A-L-Y-S-T. Inhibitor, I'll just put inhibit. And then I'll mention the 3rd one right now. Originally it was called stipulation, and the name was changed to better understand what it did to benchmark. Not as scientific sounding, but easier to get a grip on what it's supposed to be doing. A measuring stick or a benchmark, a lot easier to understand than a stipulation. So these are named the same, but catalyst and inhibitor, those only pertain, actually I put them on the wrong side, objective story and subjective story. That's the catalyst and inhibitor. Catalyst is like a gas pedal that gets things going. Inhibitor is like a brake pedal that slows them down. The very same functions on the main character and obstacle character side are called the unique ability, UE, ability, and the critical flaw, crit flaw. So even though the unique ability and the catalyst are exactly the same function, When it pertains to the very personal points of view of the main character and the obstacle character, the catalyst looks like their unique ability, something uniquely associated with the main character or the obstacle character that enhances them. Or the critical flaw is similar to the inhibitor insofar as it describes something about the main and the obstacle character that holds them back or undermines them, much like an inhibitor would slow down the story in the objective or subjective story. Now, the benchmark, that's the same for all four. I'm going to put it down here if I have room. No, I don't. I'll just put it down here on each side. Bench and bench. And what that is a way of judging how far along the story is, how close to the ending each of the four through lines is. So each will have its own benchmark. And we'll talk about how those benchmarks specifically come into play in the story. Now there are a few other story points that are called high-level appreciations like reach and tendency. I'm not going to cover them tonight because it's a little beyond the scope of our class, and in fact they're made up of other story points in different combinations. So if we look at the pure story points, we really get most of the information we need, and the others are just derivative of those. Similarly, in plot, there are some specific story points that are common to all four through lines. Rather than having a duplication of story points in each of the through lines, plot has 8 story points that pertain to all four through lines at once. And those are the goal and the consequence, the cost and the dividend, the requirements, the prerequisites, preconditions, and forewarnings. Now we won't be covering those tonight either because they're a large part of what we cover in the plot class. But for now, we'll just keep in mind there are 8 additional plot appreciations, and there are 4 overview appreciations that are made up from these that we discover here. Finally, there's one other set. There are 8 dynamic appreciations. These are all plot points, story appreciations. But in our story forming class, we talked about the forces that moved the story, and those had the main character resolve, change or steadfast, main character direction, to start or to stop, main character approach has a doer or beer, and main character mental sex, male or female. Now some of these terms have been changed in time. Most recently, the main character direction has been changed to main character growth, starting something or stopping something. What kind of growth is it? And the reason for that is that we have direction down here in problems, and also because there's no place in Dramatica that previously specifically described growth. It hasn't changed what the dynamic was, it just changes how people think about it. It's main character growth, to start or to stop, rather than the direction of their growth. Similarly, main character mental sex is now looked at as main character problem-solving technique. In fact, it ties in very much to the different underlying manner of thinking for men and women before culture indoctrination, before education, the underlying operating system of men and women. But it caused kind of a ruckus, and since in characters you can take any male or female character and make either one a male or female mental sex, it became a little confusing for people. They thought that they were mixing things up in a way they shouldn't, so we just simply changed it to male character problem-solving technique, and instead of saying male and female, we simplified it to linear and holistic. So you can see the terms change in time, and yet in spite of that, the underlying story structurally elements and dynamics remain the same. It's just the manner in which we present them to try and make them a little easier, a little more simple. But I remind you of the old ways, the old terms, just so you always have the opportunity to go back to the more precise terms if you want to have that degree of sophistication, if working with the conversational terms is not sufficient for you. So, in addition to the 4 of the main character dynamics, we had 4 plot dynamics: story work, story limit, story outcome, and story judgment. Story work was changed to story driver now, and it's action or decision. Which one drives the story forward? Story limit, option lock or time lock, what draws the story to the conclusion, running out of options, running out of time. Story outcome, success or failure, and story judgment, good or bad. Do things work out okay or not, personally and logistically between the outcome and the judgment. We're not going to cover those tonight either. I'm simply referring to them to let you know they're there, but in fact, those were already covered in our class on story forming.